Thank you so much, Professor Goldman, for doing this. We've read your draft paper you did for Columbia Law Review, and I noticed that you call those mass-defendant intellectual property lawsuits against e-commerce sellers abusive. Would you please let us know why do you think those cases are different from those typical trademark cases or other IP cases in the United States? Why do you think they're abusive?
What makes the particular genre cases abusive is that they cut several corners when it comes to due process. There are certain rules of engagement for litigation that the cases systematically deviate from and do so in a way to the disadvantage of the defendants and to justice generally. Those include naming hundreds of defendants on the same case without showing what we call joinder, without showing the relationship between each of the individual defendants. That includes things like not serving the defendants with the notice of the complaint, what we call service, that we expect that the defendants will get notified that the lawsuit is taking place against them. And the abusive litigation doesn't do that. And a third element is that they don't show personal jurisdiction sufficiently. They don't show that this court has the ability to adjudicate a case against the particular defendants at issue. These are just some of the ways in which these cases reach unjust results because they're playing games with the rules of engagement in litigation.
But a lot of people are asking me, as I also involved a little bit, and then people are asking, what if those defendants, the e-commerce sellers, are indeed infringing other people's trademark? There's a trademark. They might be using that word one way or the other. What if they are doing that? Do you think that they are still abusive? Is that cutting corner okay? Because in the end, justice is still served by prosecuting them.
Yeah, this is an ends justifies the means kind of argument, that if in fact we determine at the end of the process that the defendants were in fact infringing, however we got there should be okay. And in general, here in the United States, ends don't justify the means when it comes to court cases. That we have rules of engagement about how cases can proceed, and deviations from those rules lead to a non-success for the plaintiffs. They're not allowed to win in those circumstances. And we see this all the time in criminal context. So we have both criminal law and criminal procedure. And we have cases where someone might have in fact committed the crime, but nevertheless we release them from the judicial process because the law enforcement mechanisms didn't follow criminal procedure. And so we can't excuse violations of due process, violations of the legal procedure, just because we think that there's a good outcome at the end. If we think that that's the outcome we want to achieve, we need to change the law to accommodate that process if the Constitution permits us. And if it doesn't, then that's simply not an option.
And also, Professor Goldman, we understand that most of those defendants in those cases tend to face economic difficulties due to the TROs that the court put place. It's a temporary restraining orders. And the platforms, I'm talking about like e-commerce platforms like Amazon or other platforms, those platforms tend to freeze those accounts right away. What do you think an e-commerce seller should do if they receive the notice from their platform saying their account is frozen, there's a TRO? What should they do? I'm pretty sure right now when they receive that, at the moment they receive that, they will get very anxious and they don't know what to do. So what should they do?
The whole reason why I consider the litigation to be abusive is that those sellers are left with no really good choices. They can go and request additional consideration from the online marketplaces, who are almost certainly going to deny it. They can spend the time and money to go into court and try to fight back and show the abuses to the judge. But they don't have the time or money to do so. And so the path of least resistance is to take a settlement if it's offered by the rights owner. And I totally understand why sellers will do that. That does make sense in the short run to solve their problems. But because the incentives lead to that outcome, it creates this process where the courts aren't hearing from the sellers. They don't hear the problems that are being created for the sellers. And so we all lose by the fact that the sellers take the easy settlements.
Thank you. I understand that those cases have been there for a long time, since 2017. There are thousands of cases, if I estimate correctly, that got filed in different courts, of course, mainly in Illinois and some in New York and other states. Based on what you're saying, that a lot of defendants, they don't have a way to get a court here what's going on. But I'm sure some courts already understood what has happened. There should be other way for the court to find out what's going on. How come nobody has done anything like in those courts, in the judges? Why don't they do anything yet?
It's one of the great mysteries I'm hoping to unravel. We have seen a number of defendants, including online marketplaces, push back on the process, but only a small handful of the total number of cases. And I found most judges are just resistant to that counter narrative that disagrees with the plaintiff's arguments. And I don't know why. It doesn't make sense. For someone who came to this cold when I did, it was an obvious abuse. It was clear on its face. I didn't need someone to explain it to me. I could instantly tell that this was not correct. And I don't know why judges aren't getting that same point. It seems like it should be obvious to them, just like it was obvious to me. These cases aren't appropriate. So one of my goals is to help educate the judges the best I can, and I'm hoping that the collective efforts of sellers and online marketplaces, academics, and others will collectively raise the consciousness about the practice sufficient to the point where maybe judges will realize that they have to think about these cases differently. I can't explain why they aren't doing that today.
Thank you. So Professor Goldman just mentioned that the e-commerce platforms have been taking a hard stance because they don't want any risk, and they almost certain will freeze those accounts, won't allow relief. Do you think there's any chance that any platforms will see the defendant side and take their position? Is there any way we can make the platform see that those kind of cases might result in injustice and they can be helpful during this fight or during this campaign where we try to raise the awareness of the entire system?
I don't think that the online marketplaces are immune to understanding the seller's perspectives here. They know that the lifeblood of their business is getting a good, robust mix of merchants. And so for them, if rights owners are depopulating their corpus of merchants, that's a threat to them. And they certainly understand that. We don't need to educate them about that. The problem that I see is that the legal incentives are stacked against the online marketplaces, that there's no real incentive for them to push back because judges aren't listening. And there's no incentive for them to take a more tailored or nuanced approach to the demands that they're getting because of the fact that they face substantial legal risk from the rights owners if they don't do what the rights owners ask. So if we're ever going to hope that the online marketplaces are going to stand up more aggressively for the marketplace vendors, we need to change the legal incentives that the marketplace is facing, and that's not on the table today. So I believe that we can't expect that online marketplaces to solve this problem for us because of the fact that even though it's in their profit interest, there's still an even bigger concern they face.
The judges apparently haven't done too much yet. So what do you think the sellers can do to prevent themselves from getting to those kind of sad cases? Anything they can do to prevent them getting caught by those cases? And also outside of the seller side, what can we do from legal community to help addressing those issues in those current cases?
Well, from the seller standpoint, obviously if they're engaging in intellectual property infringement, they can avoid that. But many of the time, sellers are being caught in the system when they aren't committing intellectual property infringement. So for example, the rights owner may be doing keyword searches to try and find any reference to their trademark, which is also a common word, and then they're going to go after everybody who's identified in that search. And there's nothing sellers can do to avoid that. It's because the legal system is not correctly calibrated that sellers get caught into the system and without having done anything wrong. And so that's what I think we need to fix in terms of our legal rules or jurisprudence. We have to fix that structurally because no seller can fix that themselves. In terms of ways that we can fix it, my hope is that greater public discussion and judicial awareness about the abuses that are taking place will cause judges to become more thoughtful when they are evaluating these cases, to think more about where the games might be played and how they might be part of that, whether they think they are or not. And so if we can help educate the judges, they are the first line of defense and the most important one, because they're the ones that are being sold a story that's not true and not calling it out. If that doesn't work, then there's a variety of ways that we could potentially change the system to reduce the incentives for rights owners to abuse it. So certainly there could be reforms that we have in the statutory codes that apply. Things like the federal rules of civil procedure. They have rules, for example, about joinder. When can multiple defendants be put into the same case? And if those rules are being abused, maybe we need to take a look at them. Maybe those need refreshing to identify this problem. My personal hope is that the best way to address this would be through changing the filing fee. When we see hundreds of defendants all being sued for the same price as a single defendant, it's not unsurprising that that plaintiffs would abuse basically what's a resource that they can consume all they can eat. So if we could change something like the filing fee mechanisms, we could do a lot of work to curb the abuses just by helping internalize the costs that the rights owners are imposing on the system.
Sounds great. Wow, that's a good idea. I never